Okay, this video is going to be a brief overview of nerve control, talking first basically about how we can define nerve control, and then this sort of four-step process of step-by-step what exactly happens when you're getting nervous during a run. And then we will talk about three different categories of nerve control where we try to prevent this four-step process at some point in its cycle. Um, so there's a lot of information here. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but I highly recommend you watch this video all the way to the end. This video will be building upon the concepts that were introduced in OCPHD, which if you haven't seen that video, which is this one, where I break down all the different skills. And towards the end of the video, there's this section on nerve control. So if you haven't seen this, I recommend watching it first. It'll be linked in the description. But for the sake of this video, we will be taking the definition of nerve control and expanding on it to talk about the rest of this. And also, this video is going to be basically supplementary to the nerve control interviews that are happening at OC University this week, next week actually. If you don't know what OC University is, it is basically this improvement-focused OSU hub, just a place for top players to share their knowledge about the game in a way that's very accessible to the general community. So in keeping with that theme, next week we are hosting interviews with a bunch of different top players, focusing all about nerve control from August 9th through August 13th, 2021. So if you're watching this video after then, check out the OC University YouTube channel where all of those interviews will be uploaded. That'll be linked in the description. But if you're interested in learning more about OC University, or if you want to get involved in these interviews, definitely join the OC University Discord server. That will also be linked in the description. So now let's get started by, first of all, taking this definition of nerve control from OCPHD. So nerve control, right, as it is defined, is the ability to maintain composure and steadiness under pressure. So let's write that down. Ability to maintain composure and steadiness under pressure. So if you want to learn a bit more about how this definition came to be, definitely watch this video. But let's go ahead and talk about the four different steps that basically happen throughout a run, from starting from not being nervous at all to the exactly what we're trying to avoid when it comes to nerve control. So step one is, before you even start getting nervous, is that you're sort of on autopilot basically, and you're not really thinking about the score. And that is usually how the majority of your runs start. So say you're just kind of on autopilot. Oh, what? Not really thinking about run/score. And then what happens is that at some point in your run, you start thinking about, oh, this run is going to lead to a good score, or like, oh, this is a pretty good score, or something to that effect. So basically, you start thinking about this quote unquote subjective good score. But that realization that the run is going to be a good score is what step two is all about. So step two is you realize that the run will lead to a good score. And I put this in quotes. So the definition of what a good score is very subjective. And that is actually the premise of a couple of these categories of nerve control. But what I've found is that people define good score as something that's like at the edge of their capabilities as a player, or like the edge of their skill limit is something that would be a good score for them. But again, it's very subjective, and that's something that we'll go into a bit more at the end of the video, or later on in the video, I should say. Okay, yeah, next step is, so step three is that you actually start getting nervous. So you start getting nervous. And then there's one more step after that, which is that you start playing poorly. Oh, start playing poorly. So yeah, notice there's actually a distinction between when you start getting nervous and when you actually start playing poorly. And this idea is actually the premise of one of the categories of nerve control as well. So let's go ahead and talk about the first category of nerve control, which is trying to prevent this transition from step one to step two. So the first category is all about maintaining that like state of being in autopilot and not realizing that the run will lead to a good score at all. So this is about preventing step 1 to step 2. And this is mostly in the form of distracting yourself, I would say. So distracting yourself. So there's two different subcategories here. The first one is honestly pretty simple, which is just hiding information about the score so that you're not tempted to think about it. So hiding information about the score. And as a shorter way of referring to this, we'll call it ignorance. Not necessarily in a bad connotation, just basically ignorance here just means that you're unaware of something. So most common way that people do this is hiding the interface by pressing, press Shift plus Tab in game, and that'll hide your combo, HP bar, how much time is left in the map, and your accuracy. All that information can be toggled if you press Shift Tab. So that is good to know. Or hiding your leaderboard as well. Wait, what? Leaderboard. And this is done by pressing Tab, which I'm pretty sure the game tells you this. On like above the leaderboard, but yeah, press Tab to hide the leaderboard while you're playing and the interface, and that is a good way to just not really know or like not be fed information about the run while you're playing. Another method here is to only ever look at the local rankings in the first place. So basically like not looking at anyone else's score on that map in the first place. So yeah, only looking at local rankings. So the idea here, and actually Spaza has a really good video on this as well, where he basically talks about looking at the global ranking and the positive effects that can have on your gameplay. He mostly talks about mindset in this video, but it definitely relates a lot to nerve control as well. But basically having that expectation of comparing your run to the global ranking is something that can lead to nerves as well. Let's say there's no FCs on a map and you're holding an FC, then that can quickly escalate to you realizing, oh, this must be a good score. No one else has gotten an FC on this map. So not looking at the global rankings or not really thinking about what scores other people have gotten is a good way to distract yourself from thinking about whether or not that run is going to be a good score or not. So next sort of subcategory of nerve control here is this idea of just filling up your brain with other things so that you don't really think about the run in the first place. So what I mean by that, and this is basically the idea of something called cognitive load. You don't have to read this. Basically, cognitive load is like your brain's mana bar. So your brain has like limited capacity of like what it can be thinking about at any given time, which is what's written here. Extremely limited in capacity and duration. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously overly simplified, but the idea is that you basically distract yourself while you're playing with different tasks so that your brain doesn't wander and like start fixating on the fact that you're holding a score that would be considered good. So let's go ahead and call this cognitive load or mana. So basically what you want to do is, so let's say like you have like 100 mana in your brain, and just playing the map takes up a good percent of that, but your brain wants to use all of its mana, and so it'll just start thinking about random stuff. And chances are, like if you leave unused mana in your brain, then it will start thinking about the score. And that usually ends up leading to step 2 happening, which is what we're trying to avoid. So basically filling up your mana bar with a bunch of different tasks so that, or even just one big task on the side so that your brain doesn't start thinking about the score. So yeah, filling up your leftover mana with other stuff. So I made a tweet a couple months ago about how do you personally handle tournament nerves. Oh, yep, follow me on Twitter, by the way. But I got this reply, which was very interesting. So this tweet was specifically about tournament nerves. This video actually is more focused on solo play nerves. But actually, if you're interested in nerve control for tournaments in particular, That will be something that's discussed in the OC University nerve control interviews. So yeah, check this out. But this reply basically says, if he gets nervous during a tournament, he likes to imagine a leaky faucet until he can no longer hold the mental sound and image. And this is basically exactly what this is sort of talking about. Like, some of your mana is spent just playing the map, and then the rest of your mana is spent on thinking about this leaky faucet. And so you have no mana left to worry about whether or not your score is good, because you're just so consumed by thinking about this leaky faucet idea. So leaky faucet, genius idea. Something else that I know a lot of people do, or that some people do, is chewing gum while they play. That's another thing that I've heard works for some people. And also, okay, talking while playing, or listening to something. So I know a lot of people, they sit in calls, like voice calls while they play, or they have different YouTube videos, such as maybe this one, while they're playing. So that is something that people definitely use to sort of distract themselves, while they're playing. And I will end this section by referencing one beautiful demonstration of filling up your mana bar with something else. So this old Azer score from 2017. This is this Space Stream Camellia map, and he was FCing. Look at this guy. He's FCing at the end. Look at these awesome space streams. And then what happens is, if you look at the hand cam, so his cat comes over, and look at this guy. He's hitting all these streams, and his cat's hind legs were on his tapping hand. And so what happened in this run, he was so distracted by his cat ruining his score that he didn't even think about getting nervous. Look at this guy. Look at these streams. This guy's going crazy. Let's go, Azer. And then listen to what he says at the end.
I was so focused on Dashi not ruining my play that I kind of forgot to be nervous.
Actually, so I mean, obviously, very hard to replicate a situation like this. But if it happens, very good way to not get nervous. A bit of an extreme example, but I think it's worth showing for the sake of understanding this idea of getting distracted by other things, and that leading to you not really thinking about getting nervous. So this is cat messing up run, Azer incident. Okay, so that is the first category of nerve control, and the second one, which on paper will seem kind of similar to the first one, but I'll try to explain it. So the second category is to make step 2 impossible. So instead of preventing the transition from step 1 to step 2, which actually I'll go ahead and draw this little arrow. So yeah, instead of preventing this arrow, you prevent step 2 from being possible in the first place. And that is through what I was talking about earlier, this sort of subjective understanding of what a quote-unquote good score is. So is make step 2 impossible. And that is through expectations. So there's actually two different, I guess, subcategories to this one as well. The first one is more so probably what you'd expect. So instead of a quote-unquote good score being the edge of your skill level capabilities, instead what you do is you sort of manipulate your understanding of what a good score is. If your understanding or concept of a good score to you is way beyond your skill level, then in theory, this will never happen, because no score that you set will ever qualify as a quote-unquote good score. So this is just having such high expectations that no score you set could classify as a good score. So a prime example of this is Rohulk's mindset, especially when he was improving. So this is from the HappyStick Improvement Month interviews that were done a couple of years ago. But basically, oh yeah, okay. By the way, this is an aside, but if you don't know how this transcript thingy came to be, you click on these dots, and then there's this button to open the transcript for a YouTube video. Yeah, okay, anyway. So Rohulk basically, so when he was improving, he had this mindset that like he had what it took to become a top player. So here he basically talks about like even like if he got lucky and like hit a really hard pattern or like got a really good score, he basically in his head, because like his expectation was that he had it like the ability within him to become a top player. So whenever something like that would happen, he would be like, "Oh, that's normal. I should be able to do that. Why would I be happy about it?" And then he would just sort of move on and not really get too caught up in the fact that it's a quote unquote good score, even though it was at the edge of his capabilities. So this is Rohulk. I think was a really good example of this, where he says like the edge of my capabilities is not the edge of a top player's capabilities. So this was, yeah, Rohulk's mindset, which I think worked really well for him in terms of not getting nervous. Other players that sort of have this high expectations leading to low nerves, people like Bubbleman and Cookiezi, from what I understand, players like these have this sort of idea of like having such high expectations leads to you not really caring if you're holding a score, even if it's like really good or world class. Even like I know Cookiezi, sometimes he would like set this like crazy score that like everyone in the community is hyped about, and it's like low 99% or like high 98 or something, and he's like, yeah, rip ack, or why is my ack so bad when I FC or something like that. So yeah, very prime example of that. And I know there was this Reddit post a couple of weeks ago or about a month ago, um, where someone was asking like, why do people say please submit on older Cookiezi videos? And basically, Cookiezi like had such high standards sometimes that like even if a score was considered really good by the community, like if he wasn't happy with the score, he would sometimes not submit at all. Um, yeah, this Reddit thread, if you want to read through these comments, it'll be linked in the description. Actually, oh yeah, all the links that I've mentioned so far will be in the description. But um, yeah, that is a really good example as well of just having such high expectations that nothing you do will really classify as a good score. The other or subcategory of nerve control for like making step 2 impossible is basically working your way up to that good score. So um, what you want to do in this case is, or how do I word this? The results of like this subcategory of nerves is that you desensitize yourself to like how impressive that score is. That and I think that's the simplest way to put this is that you basically just choke your way to the score that you want. Um, and in that sense, let's say like the first time you get to the end of a map that makes you feel nervous or that you think will be a good score, you get to the end with FC and you're like, oh my god, I'm FCing. This is such a good score for me. I've never made it here before. Um, and then you obviously you start feeling nervous because you're like, oh my god, this is such a good score. And then you choke and you're like, man, that sucks. Then you try the map again, you get to the end again with FC, and you're like, oh man, here we go again. And then you choke because you're like, oh my god, that would have been such a good score. Um, and basically, after like 6 or 7 or like however many chokes, like you stop feeling that it's as impressive just because like you've been there so many times that it's just like you've readapted your expectation of your capabilities as a player. Like if you're able to get to the end of that map like 6, 7, 8 times, then clearly it's not at the edge of your capabilities, and maybe it's not as good of a score as you think it might be. So that's basically the idea here. So working your way up to the good score by desensitizing yourself to the impressiveness. Sort of, I guess, convoluted way to word it, but basically it's just like you get so used to that score that it's not impressive to you anymore. So in other words, that is choke your way to the score you want. Honestly, I think if I had to pick one, this is probably the method that I use the most, because I get to the end of a map and I'm like, well, if I like don't get the score now, then I'll just choke and I'll like try doing it again later. And then usually what happens is that I choke, and then I just like have to keep getting back to that spot or like that point where I'm on a good run again, and then eventually, you choke your way there. Okay, so last little category of nerf control is basically, okay, so first category was preventing this transition from step 1 to step 2. Second category was making step 2 impossible. The third category is sort of what banks on this concept of these two being different, is that you try to prevent this transition from getting nervous to playing poorly. So what the third category basically says is like these two categories are like not going to work for me. Like it's impossible to prevent this arrow, and it's impossible to prevent like this, like thinking about the good score. Like all this is like not really helpful, or like not really that easy for you. Then what you can do instead is you basically treat playing through nerves as a skill that you can train. And so over time, you get better at not playing poorly when you do get nervous. Um, so, and that basically is the prevention of step 3 to step 4. So that is, okay, so step 3, we'll say, or category 3 is preventing step 3 to step 4. So learning to play through nerves. So yeah, the idea here is that just like tapping stamina is like a skill that you can train and things like that, playing through nerves is also seen as a skill that you can train and get better at, and like just not getting as shaky. So this idea sees playing through nerves as a skill that you can get better at. Oh, typo. So what you want to do here is, so when you do start feeling nervous, I think what a lot of people end up doing is they, pause and try to take a breather. And like, let's say after you choke a run and like you're feeling really nervous, then you sort of sit there and you wait for those nerves to go away, and then you play the map again. But the idea here is if you practice just playing the map again instead of sitting there, like waiting for the nerves to go away, if you just keep playing the game while you're feeling shaky, that is like the perfect opportunity for you to practice this skill. And then over time, the idea is that you'll get better at playing the game and maintaining stability, even when you're feeling nervous and shaky. So yeah, so when you do get nervous, that's your opportunity to practice this skill. And yeah, so keep playing through maps while nervous to practice playing well despite those nerves. And I think the players that advocate for this sort of method the most is, I'd say, people like idke and Aryu are people that I've heard this discussed the most. And idke actually, he made this twit longer, actually a long time ago, January 2017. But he made this twit longer, which I'll link in the description if you're interested. Going through his take basically on a bunch of different nerve control methods. It's a pretty long read, and of course, like I said, it'll be in the description. But he actually mentions a lot of the different categories that are here as well. But I guess in a more rambly format. But he includes his own personal anecdotes, like when he was trying to get an FC on Uta, for example, his accuracy standards were so high that like even if he was holding an FC on Uta, if it wasn't like 99.5% or higher, then like he wouldn't feel nervous. Or for example on Big Black as well, when his standards were that like if it wasn't an SS, then it's not a good score. But he talks about a lot of the same ideas. If you're interested in reading this, I definitely recommend checking it out in the description. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful, a bit of a crash course on nerve control. And like I said, if you're interested in learning a lot more about nerf control and different players' perspectives on it. Definitely check out the OSU University interviews that will be happening next week, August 9th through August 13th, 2021. Links for that will be in the description. And if you're watching this video after those dates, check out the recordings of the interviews on the OSU University YouTube channel. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please share it and share all these wonderful resources as well. And I'll see you guys next time.